In a quiet little town surrounded by lush green hills and wide open fields, there lived a man named Sam Carter. He wasn't rich or famous, far from it, but he was known throughout the area for two things: his skill as a mechanic and his big heart. Sam ran a small garage at the edge of town, where he fixed everything from rusty old cars to broken-down bicycles. His hands were always greasy, but his smile was warm, and people trusted him. One drizzly afternoon, when the sky seemed heavy with clouds and raindrops tapped gently on the roof of the garage, Sam was busy working under the hood of an old pickup truck. The air smelled of oil and damp metal, and the sound of tools clinking against each other filled the room. Just as he tightened the last bolt, the door creaked open, and a woman stepped inside, holding the hand of a young boy in a wheelchair. Both were soaked from the rain, their clothes clinging to their bodies. The woman introduced herself as Laura, her voice trembling slightly as she explained why she had come. Her son, Ethan, sat silently in the wheelchair, his bright blue eyes watching Sam curiously. Ethan was 8 years old and had cerebral palsy, which made it hard for him to walk. For years, the wheelchair had been his lifeline, allowing him to move around and explore the world despite his condition. But now, the once reliable chair was broken beyond repair. One wheel wobbled dangerously, the seat cushion was torn, and the footrests were completely detached. Laura's face was pale with worry as she told Sam that they couldn't afford to fix it, or worse, replace it. She worked long hours at a diner just to make ends meet, and every penny they had went toward Ethan's medical bills. Without the wheelchair, Ethan would be stuck indoors, unable to go to school or play outside with his friends. "Please," she begged, tears welling up in her eyes, "is there anything you can do?" Sam wiped his hands on a rag and looked at them closely. He saw the exhaustion on Laura's face, the way her shoulders sagged under the weight of responsibility. And then there was Ethan, sitting quietly in the battered chair, trying not to look too disappointed. Something stirred deep within Sam, a mix of sadness and determination. He knew what it felt like to struggle. After all, he'd grown up poor himself, raised by a single mother who often sacrificed her own needs for his. Without hesitation, Sam nodded. "Don't worry, ma'am," he said firmly. "I'll take care of it." Laura blinked in surprise, unsure if she'd heard him correctly. "But how much will it cost?" she asked hesitantly, already dreading the answer. Sam shook his head. "Nothing. Consider it my gift to Ethan." Her jaw dropped, and for a moment, she didn't know what to say. Then, overcome with emotion, she hugged Ethan tightly, whispering, thank you so much." Ethan grinned shyly, his cheeks flushing pink. As Laura and Ethan waited nearby, Sam got straight to work. He rolled up his sleeves, pulling out spare parts from shelves and rummaging through boxes until he found exactly what he needed. Hours passed, and the rain continued to fall outside, but Sam barely noticed. He focused intently on every detail, determined to give Ethan the best possible repair job. By the time he finished, the sun had begun to peek through the clouds, casting golden light into the garage. When Sam wheeled the repaired chair over to them, Laura gasped. It looked almost brand new, sturdy, and reliable once again. "This is incredible," she murmured, her voice thick with gratitude. "How can we ever repay you?" Sam chuckled softly. "Just take good care of him," he replied, ruffling Ethan's hair. "That's all the thanks I need." Little did Sam know, this simple act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change his life and the lives of countless others, in ways he could never have imagined. The days following Richard Langston's visit were a whirlwind for Sam. He couldn't stop thinking about the conversation they'd had in his garage. The idea of leading a global foundation felt like stepping onto another planet. Exciting, sure, but also terrifying. How could someone like him, who spent most of his life fixing engines and changing tires, possibly manage something so massive? Yet deep down, he couldn't ignore the tiny voice whispering that maybe, just maybe, this was his chance to do something extraordinary. Still wrestling with doubt, Sam decided to take Richard up on his offer, to at least hear him out properly. After all, what harm could come from meeting the man again? Maybe it would help him make sense of everything. So when Richard called the next day to invite Sam to lunch at a fancy restaurant downtown, Sam reluctantly agreed. On the morning of the meeting, Sam stood in front of his closet for far too long, trying to figure out what to wear. His usual jeans and t-shirt combo wouldn't cut it here. He knew that much. Eventually, he settled on a pair of khakis and a button-up shirt, though he felt awkward and out of place as soon as he put them on. Stepping into his old pickup truck, he drove toward the city, wondering if he was making a mistake. When he arrived at the restaurant, he realized he underestimated just how fancy it would be. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting soft golden light over pristine white tablecloths. Waiters glided silently across the floor, carrying trays of food that looked more like art than meals. And there, seated near the window, was Richard, looking every bit as polished and confident as before. "Sam," Richard greeted him warmly, standing up to shake his hand. "I'm glad you came." Sam forced a smile, feeling completely out of his element. "Yeah, well, figure I owed you the courtesy after showing up at my garage the other day." Richard laughed, motioning for Sam to sit. "Don't worry, I promise we won't bite. Besides, I think you'll find this conversation worth your while." As they ordered their food, Sam opting for the simplest thing on the menu, while Richard chose something with a name he couldn't pronounce, they dove into the details of the foundation. Richard explained his vision: a world where no child with a disability would go without the tools or support they needed to live a full life. From providing wheelchairs and prosthetics to funding surgeries and therapy sessions, the foundation aimed to tackle problems head-on. "But here's the thing," Richard said, leaning forward slightly. "This isn't just about handing out equipment or writing checks. It's about creating lasting change. That means training local communities to maintain mobility devices, partnering with hospitals and schools, and raising awareness globally. It's big, Sam. Bigger than either of us alone. But together, I believe we can pull it off." Sam listened intently, his initial skepticism slowly giving way to admiration. Richard wasn't just talking about charity. He was talking about empowerment, about giving people the tools to stand on their own 2 feet, or wheels, in Ethan's case. "What do you say?" Richard asked finally, his eyes locking onto Sam's. "Will you join me in building this? You don't have to decide right now, but I hope you'll consider it." Sam hesitated, staring at the glass of water in front of him. For years, he'd lived a quiet, predictable life, content with small victories. But now, sitting across from this man with grand dreams, he felt something stir inside him, a spark of possibility. Could he really step out of his comfort zone and embrace something bigger? "I'll think about it," Sam said finally, offering a small smile. "But I won't lie, Richard. This is a lot to take in." Richard nodded understandingly. "Of course. Take all the time you need. Just remember, you've already proven you're capable of greatness. Now it's time to see how far that greatness can go." As they parted ways later that afternoon, Sam climbed back into his truck, his mind buzzing with thoughts. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was standing at the edge of something incredible. All he had to do was take the leap. Sam stared at Richard Langston, his mind racing to process the surreal scene unfolding before him. Here was a man who looked like he'd stepped straight out of a magazine. Sharp suit, polished shoes, and an aura of power that seemed almost intimidating. And yet there he was, standing in Sam's humble garage, surrounded by oil stains and scattered tools, offering gratitude for something as ordinary as fixing a wheelchair. "Mr. Carter," Richard repeated, his tone warm but firm, "I can't thank you enough for what you did for my nephew, Ethan. It wasn't just about the wheelchair. It was the kindness behind it. That's rare these days." Sam finally shook Richard's hand, though he still felt out of place. It was nothing, really," he stammered, glancing around at the chaos of his workspace. "Anyone would have done the same." Richard raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. You'd be surprised how few people would. Most wouldn't even notice someone like Laura and Ethan struggling. But you saw them, listened to them, and acted without expecting anything in return. That's why I'm here, to repay your generosity. Sam shifted uncomfortably, wiping his hands on a rag. Look, Mr. Langston, I don't need repayment. Helping folks is just part of who I am. I didn't do it for recognition or rewards. Richard smiled, but there was a seriousness in his eyes that suggested he wasn't going to let this go so easily. Call me Richard, please. And while I respect your humility, Sam, I believe good deeds should be acknowledged and multiplied. Let me explain. He gestured toward the makeshift seating area near the corner of the garage, where a couple of old chairs sat beside a rickety table. Sam hesitated but eventually joined him, curiosity getting the better of him. Richard's assistants remained outside, whispering among themselves, leaving the two men alone for their conversation. I've been thinking a lot about what you did, Richard began, leaning forward slightly, about how one person's actions can create ripples far beyond what they might expect. Your kindness inspired me, not just because of Ethan, but because it reminded me of something I've been wanting to do for years. Sam tilted his head, intrigued. What's that? Richard took a deep breath, his expression thoughtful. I want to start a foundation, a charitable organization dedicated to helping children with disabilities. Not just locally, but globally. We'll provide wheelchairs, prosthetics, medical care, therapy, whatever it takes to give kids like Ethan a chance at a better life. But I need someone to lead it. Someone trustworthy, compassionate, and grounded. Someone like you. Sam blinked, stunned. Me? Lead a foundation? You must have the wrong guy. I'm just a mechanic. Richard chuckled softly, shaking his head. No, Sam, you're exactly the right guy. You may not realize it, but you embody everything this foundation needs. Honesty, hard work, and a genuine desire to help others. You don't care about fame or fortune. You care about making a difference. That's priceless. Sam opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. He had never imagined himself doing anything beyond fixing cars and helping neighbors. Running a global charity, it sounded impossible. Yet as he looked into Richard's determined eyes, he couldn't deny the spark of excitement growing inside him. Maybe, just maybe, he could do more than he ever dreamed. You be supported every step of the way, Richard added, sensing Sam's hesitation. I'll handle the funding and logistics. All I need from you is your heart and leadership. Think about it, Sam. Together, we could change lives, not just one family at a time, but thousands. The weight of the offer settled over Sam like a heavy blanket. For the first time in his life, he felt torn between staying in the comfort of his familiar world and stepping into the unknown. As Richard stood up to leave, handing Sam a business card with his contact information, he said simply, "Take some time to think it over. But remember this, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness open doors we never knew existed." And with that, Richard walked out of the garage, leaving Sam sitting in stunned silence, staring at the card in his hand. As the foundation grew, so did Sam's confidence and sense of purpose. What had started as a leap of faith was now becoming his life's work. Every day brought new challenges, but also new rewards, stories of hope, resilience, and transformation that reminded him why he'd taken this path in the first place. Still, stepping into the world of global philanthropy wasn't without its hurdles. For someone who had spent most of his life fixing cars and chatting with neighbors, navigating high society events and corporate meetings felt like learning an entirely new language. At first, Sam struggled to adapt. The polished boardrooms, the formal dinners, the endless networking. It all seemed so foreign compared to the grease-streaked familiarity of his garage. During one particularly intimidating meeting with potential donors, Sam found himself fumbling over words, unsure how to explain the foundation's mission in a way that resonated with people more concerned about tax write-offs than heartfelt impact. He left feeling defeated, wondering if he'd ever truly belong in this world. But Richard, ever the mentor, pulled him aside afterward. "Sam," he said firmly, "you don't need to be anyone other than yourself. These people aren't investing in suits or fancy speeches. They're investing in you, in your authenticity. That's what sets us apart." Taking Richard's advice to heart, Sam began leaning into his natural personality. Instead of trying to impress donors with complex jargon, he shared real stories, like Mia's joy when she received her first wheelchair or Ethan's newfound independence thanks to his repaired chair. He spoke from the heart, letting his passion shine through. Slowly but surely, people started listening, not because of flashy presentations, but because they could feel the sincerity behind every word. Beyond fundraising, Sam threw himself into expanding the foundation's reach. One of his proudest initiatives was mobility hubs, centers set up in underserved communities where families could access free repairs for wheelchairs, prosthetics, and other mobility devices. Sam personally oversaw the training programs for local mechanics, teaching them not only technical skills, but also the importance of compassion and service. Watching these individuals take ownership of the hubs filled Sam with pride. It was proof that the foundation wasn't just giving handouts, it was empowering communities to sustain themselves. Traveling became a regular part of Sam's life. From bustling cities to remote villages, he visited places he never dreamed of seeing. In India, he met a boy named Arjun, whose family couldn't afford crutches after a leg injury. Thanks to the foundation, Arjun received a custom-built pair, allowing him to return to school and chase his dream of becoming a teacher. In Kenya, Sam worked alongside volunteers to distribute wheelchairs to children living in rural areas, many of whom had never left their homes before. Each trip reinforced the magnitude of what they were doing and the ripple effects of kindness. Back home, Sam stayed connected to his roots. His garage, once the center of his world, had become something of a community hub. Neighbors stopped by to drop off old wheelchairs or bicycles they no longer used, knowing Sam would refurbish them for the foundation. On weekends, volunteers gathered to clean, repair, and prepare equipment for shipment. Even Laura and Ethan visited often, bringing homemade cookies or simply sitting with Sam as he tinkered on projects. Their presence reminded him of where it all began and kept him grounded amid the whirlwind of change. Despite the demands of his new role, Sam made time for self-reflection. Late at night, when the house was quiet and the weight of responsibility pressed down on him, he'd sit outside under the stars, thinking about how far he'd come. Sometimes doubt crept in. Was he really making a difference? Could one person, even with an entire team behind him, truly tackle such a massive problem? But then he'd remember the faces, the smiles, the tears, the hugs, and know the answer was yes. By the end of the second year, the foundation had helped tens of thousands of children worldwide. It wasn't just about numbers, though. To Sam, each child represented a story of hope, a chance at a brighter future. And while he knew there was still so much work to be done, he also knew one thing for certain. He was exactly where he was meant to be. As the foundation entered its third year, Sam's impact began to ripple outward in ways he could never have anticipated. What had started as a simple act of kindness, fixing a broken wheelchair for Ethan, had grown into a movement that touched lives across continents. The foundation's name became synonymous with hope, and Sam himself became a symbol of what ordinary people could achieve when they dared to dream big. One of the most transformative programs Sam spearheaded was Wheels for Dreams, an initiative designed to provide not just mobility aids, but also holistic support to families. Through this program, children received physical therapy, educational resources, and even mentorship opportunities to help them pursue their ambitions. For example, a teenager named Sofia in Brazil, who dreamed of becoming an artist despite being born with a spinal condition, was given not only a custom wheelchair, but also art supplies and online classes. Her first painting, a vibrant sunset over Rio de Janeiro, was later featured at a charity gala hosted by the foundation. When Sophia stood, with assistants, to thank everyone for believing in her, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Sam also realized early on that sustainability was key. While donating equipment was vital, it wouldn't create lasting change unless communities were equipped to maintain it. That's why he doubled down on training local mechanics and caregivers. In rural parts of Africa and Asia, these newly trained individuals became pillars of their communities, ensuring that wheelchairs stayed functional and prosthetics remained comfortable. One mechanic in Uganda, a man named Joseph, sent Sam a heartfelt letter saying, "Because of you, I can now provide for my family and help others. Thank you for trusting us to carry this mission forward." But perhaps the most unexpected outcome of the foundation's success was how it inspired others to pay it forward. Stories of generosity poured in from all corners. A group of high school students in Canada organized a fundraiser to collect used wheelchairs. A retired doctor in Australia volunteered her time to design affordable prosthetic limbs, and a tech company in Silicon Valley developed an app to connect donors with families in need. Each story reminded Sam of the power of collective effort, the idea that one person's kindness could spark a chain reaction. Despite the foundation's monumental growth, Sam refused to lose sight of his roots. Every weekend, he returned to his garage, where volunteers continued refurbishing old wheelchairs and bikes. It was his sanctuary, a place where he could escape the pressures of leadership and reconnect with the hands-on work he loved. He often invited Ethan and Laura to join him, turning the space into a lively gathering spot filled with laughter and shared meals. Ethan, now older and more confident, proudly showed off his skills by helping clean tools or organize parts. Seeing the boy thrive gave Sam immense satisfaction. It was proof that his journey had come full circle. Even as accolades rolled in, articles in newspapers, interviews on TV, awards at galas, Sam remained humble. He avoided the spotlight whenever possible, preferring to let the foundation's beneficiaries take center stage. At one event, when asked how he managed to achieve so much, he simply smiled and said, "I didn't do it alone." None of this would have been possible without the support of incredible people around the world who believe in making a difference. The foundation's milestones were celebrated with joy and gratitude, but Sam knew the work was far from over. There were still millions of children waiting for help, countless stories yet to be written. Yet, instead of feeling overwhelmed, he felt energized. Every challenge, every late-night strategy session, every moment of doubt was worth it when he saw the smiles on the faces of those they served. By the end of the third year, the foundation had reached over 50 countries and transformed the lives of hundreds of thousands of children. But for Sam, the true measure of success wasn't in the numbers. It was in the connections forged, the barriers broken, and the belief instilled in others that no act of kindness, no matter how small, was ever wasted. As he looked ahead to the future, he carried with him the lessons he'd learned along the way. That compassion knows no boundaries, that teamwork makes dreams possible, and that even a mechanic from a small town could change the world. One repair, one wheelchair, one life at a time. Sam spent the next few days wrestling with Richard's offer, his mind a whirlwind of excitement and doubt. On one hand, the idea of helping children around the world, kids like Ethan, was deeply inspiring. He could already picture it, wheelchairs being delivered to remote villages, kids smiling as they moved freely for the first time, families overwhelmed with gratitude. But on the other hand, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't qualified for such a massive responsibility. What did he know about running a global organization? About fundraising, logistics, or navigating high-profile events? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Still, the more Sam thought about it, the more he realized something important. He didn't have to do it alone. Richard had promised him support every step of the way, and Sam trusted the man's sincerity. If Richard believed in him, maybe, just maybe, he should believe in himself too. With a deep breath, Sam picked up the phone and dialed the number on Richard's business card. When Richard answered, his voice brimming with enthusiasm, Sam said simply, "I'm in." Richard's response was immediate and heartfelt. "You won't regret this, Sam. I promise you. We're going to change lives, including yours." Over the following weeks, Sam's life transformed in ways he never imagined. Richard wasted no time getting things moving. They began by setting up an office in the city, hiring a team of experts to handle the technical aspects of the foundation. There were accountants, marketers, event planners, and even doctors specializing in pediatric care. At first, Sam felt completely out of place among these professionals, many of whom wore suits and spoke in jargon he barely understood. But instead of letting his insecurities overwhelm him, he leaned into his strengths: honesty, empathy, and a knack for problem-solving. One of Sam's first tasks was traveling with Richard to meet families who would benefit from the foundation's work. Their first stop was a small town several hours away, where they visited a young girl named Mia. She was 6 years old and born without the use of her legs, relying on a makeshift walker that barely supported her weight. Her parents worked long hours at minimum wage jobs, leaving no money for proper medical equipment. When Sam and Richard arrived with a brand new wheelchair tailored specifically for Mia, her eyes lit up with joy. Watching her roll herself across the room for the first time brought tears to everyone's eyes, including Sam's. These trips became a regular part of Sam's routine. Each family they met had its own story, its own struggles, and its own hopes. And each interaction reminded Sam why he'd agreed to take on this role. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about giving people a chance to live fuller, happier lives. Of course, adjusting to his new responsibilities wasn't easy. Back at the office, Sam faced challenges he never anticipated. Meetings stretched on for hours, filled with discussions about budgets, partnerships, and strategies. He struggled to keep up with the fast-paced corporate environment, often feeling like he was drowning in spreadsheets and reports. But whenever he doubted himself, he remembered Mia's smile, or Ethan's laughter, or the countless other moments that made all the hard work worth it. To help bridge the gap between his old life and his new one, Sam decided to bring a piece of his garage into the foundation. He launched a program called Mechanics for Mobility, which trained local mechanics in underserved areas to repair wheelchairs and prosthetics. The initiative not only ensured that donated equipment stayed functional, but also created jobs within those communities. It was a win-win, and Sam took immense pride in seeing it come to life. As months passed, Sam grew more confident in his role. He learned to navigate boardroom meetings, deliver speeches, and connect with donors. Yet, despite all the changes, he remained grounded. Every evening after a long day of work, he'd return home to his modest house, kick off his shoes, and tinker with an old car in his driveway. Those quiet moments reminded him of where he came from and why he kept pushing forward. By the end of the year, the foundation had helped thousands of children worldwide. Wheelchairs rolled into villages, prosthetic limbs changed lives, and therapy programs gave hope to families who once felt abandoned. Through it all, Sam stood at the heart of it, proving that kindness and determination could move mountains, even if you started as just a mechanic with grease-stained hands. Years passed, and the foundation Sam had helped build grew into a global force for good. It wasn't just about wheelchairs anymore. It was about creating opportunities, breaking barriers, and giving children with disabilities a chance to live their dreams. The ripple effect of Sam's initial act of kindness had spread far beyond what anyone could have imagined. And yet, despite the scale of his accomplishments, Sam remained the same humble man who once spent his days fixing cars in a small-town garage. One crisp autumn evening, the foundation hosted its annual gala at a grand hall in the city. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting warm light on tables adorned with elegant centerpieces. Guests mingled, dressed in their finest attire, while videos played on large screens showcasing the foundation's impact. Children walking for the first time, families smiling through tears of gratitude, communities coming together to support one another. At the heart of it all stood Sam, now a seasoned leader, but still wearing his signature modesty like a badge of honor. When it was time for speeches, Richard Langston took the stage first. He spoke passionately about the Foundation's journey, crediting its success to the tireless efforts of everyone involved. But when he introduced Sam, the room erupted into applause so thunderous that it brought tears to Sam's eyes. As he stepped up to the podium, adjusting the microphone nervously, he looked out at the sea of faces, donors, volunteers, beneficiaries, and felt a wave of emotion wash over him. "I never thought I'd be standing here," Sam began, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. "When I fixed Ethan's wheelchair all those years ago, I didn't expect anything in return. I just saw a kid who needed help and did what I could. But that one decision, to lend a hand, set off a chain reaction that changed not only my life, but the lives of thousands of others." He paused, glancing toward the front row where Laura and Ethan sat. Ethan, now a teenager, gave him a thumbs up, grinning proudly from his upgraded wheelchair. Sam smiled back before continuing. "What I've learned is this: kindness has power. It might start small, a repaired chair, a donated bike, a moment of compassion, but it grows. It spreads. It inspires others to do the same. None of us can solve every problem in the world, but we can each play a part in making it better." The crowd erupted into applause again, many wiping away tears as they reflected on his words. For Sam, though, the real reward wasn't the clapping or the accolades. It was knowing that the work would continue long after the event ended. New programs were already in development, partnerships were being formed, and countless more lives were waiting to be touched. After the gala, as Sam walked outside into the cool night air, he paused to look up at the stars. They twinkled brightly against the dark sky, reminding him of how vast the world was, and how interconnected its people truly were. He thought about Mia, Arjun, Sophia, Joseph, and all the others whose stories had shaped his journey. Each of them carried a piece of the Foundation's mission within them, proving that change wasn't limited to one person or one place. It was everywhere, fueled by acts of love and generosity. Back home later that night, Sam sat on his porch, sipping coffee and reflecting on everything that had happened. His phone buzzed with messages from friends, colleagues, and strangers thanking him for his work. One message stood out, a photo sent by Joseph, the mechanic from Uganda. In the picture, Joseph stood beside a young boy in a newly repaired wheelchair, both smiling broadly. The caption read, "Because of you, we keep moving forward." Sam stared at the image for a long time, a lump forming in his throat. That was it. That was the legacy he wanted to leave behind. Not fame or fortune, but a world where people believed in helping one another, no matter how big or small the gesture, where kindness sparked kindness and hope inspired hope. As he leaned back in his chair, listening to the quiet hum of crickets in the distance, Sam knew one thing for certain. His story wasn't really about him. It was about the countless individuals who had joined hands to create something extraordinary. Together, they had proven that even the smallest acts of kindness could set off waves of change, reaching farther than anyone ever dreamed possible. And somewhere, in some corner of the world, someone else was deciding to do something kind, continuing the cycle that Sam had unknowingly started years ago, with nothing. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the cracks in the garage's wooden walls, Sam arrived early to open up for the day. The memory of Laura and Ethan lingered in his mind, a quiet satisfaction warming his chest. Fixing that wheelchair had been more than just another job. It felt like he'd made a real difference, even if only in one small corner of the world. He didn't expect anything in return. Helping people was simply what he did when he could. As Sam began organizing tools and checking off tasks on his to-do list, the sound of footsteps echoed outside. He looked up, surprised to see Laura walking toward the garage again. This time, however, she wasn't pushing Ethan's wheelchair. Instead, she carried an envelope in her hand, its edges slightly crumpled from being tightly gripped. Her expression was a mix of nervousness and gratitude, and Sam immediately noticed the weight behind her eyes. "Morning, Laura." Sam greeted her warmly, setting down the wrench he'd been holding. "Is everything okay with the chair? Did something break already?" Laura shook her head quickly, her lips curving into a faint smile. No, it's perfect. Ethan loves it. He hasn't stopped talking about how smooth it feels. That's not why I'm here." She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "Someone wants to thank you. Personally." Sam frowned, confused. "Who?" She handed him the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. "Just read it, please." Curiosity piqued, Sam opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a neatly folded piece of paper, the handwriting elegant yet firm. As he scanned the letter, his eyebrows shot up in disbelief. It began with heartfelt thanks, praising Sam for his generosity and kindness. But what caught his attention most was the signature at the bottom, Richard Langston. The name sounded vaguely familiar, though Sam couldn't place it right away. "What is this?" Sam asked, looking back at Laura. "Who's Richard Langston?" Laura hesitated for a moment before answering. "He's Ethan's uncle, my brother-in-law. He's a very important man. A businessman. When I told him about what you did, for free, no less, he wanted to express his gratitude." Sam scratched the back of his neck, feeling uneasy. He wasn't used to receiving praise, let alone from someone who seemed so far removed from his everyday life. "I didn't do it for recognition," he said honestly. "I just saw a kid who needed help. That's all." Laura nodded, her smile softening. "I know. And that's exactly why Richard wanted to write to you. He said you reminded him of something rare these days. Genuine goodness." Sam chuckled awkwardly, shoving the letter into his pocket. "Well, tell your brother-in-law he doesn't need to go out of his way. Like I said, it was nothing." But Laura's expression grew serious. "You don't understand, Sam. To someone like Richard, acts like yours mean everything. Trust me, he won't forget this." Over the next couple of days, Sam tried to put the letter out of his mind. Life went on as usual. Cars rolled into the garage, engines sputtered, and customers came and went. Yet every now and then, he'd catch himself thinking about Richard Langston and wondering who he really was. Was he some big-shot CEO, a millionaire, or maybe just a regular guy with a fancy title? Whatever the case, Sam figured the letter was the end of it. People wrote notes of appreciation all the time, right? No big deal. That was until 2 days later, when the entire town buzzed with excitement over an unexpected visitor. A private jet, a gleaming silver bird, descended onto the tiny airstrip on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of thing that only happened in movies or dreams, not in sleepy little towns like theirs. Everyone talked about it. Who could possibly be visiting? Why here? What did it mean? Sam, however, paid little attention to the commotion. He was elbow-deep in oil, fixing the stubborn transmission, when one of his neighbors burst into the garage, breathless with news. "Sam, you won't believe this. It's for you." "For me?" Sam repeated, baffled. "What are you talking about?" Before the neighbor could explain further, the roar of an engine drew closer. Moments later, a sleek black car pulled up outside the garage. Out stepped a tall, impeccably dressed man with sharp features and an air of authority. Behind him trailed several assistants carrying briefcases and tablets. The man strode directly toward Sam, extending a hand. "Mr. Carter," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "My name is Richard Langston. We've never met, but I owe you a debt of gratitude." Sam froze, his greasy hand hovering midair. This was the man from the letter, the mysterious Richard Langston. And judging by the look in his eyes, Sam realized that his simple act of kindness was about to lead to something far greater than he'd ever imagined.